G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube for this late night tea decaffeinated edition. Tonight we'll be covering the narrow loss to Essendon at Optus Stadium, where I'll be discussing best players for West Coast, what's most exciting about who was in the best players, as well as key takeaways from the match and predictions on how the 2025 season will be shaping. But firstly, I'd like to humbly request, as always, that anybody watching this video who's not already a subscriber to please consider hitting that subscribe button just to ensure you don't miss any future content that I'm putting out weekly now as a rule, which also includes waffle reviews now that the West Coast Waffle team has commenced also. As I always mention, this channel is a very time-consuming passion and won't be monetized until it reaches a minimum of 1,000 subscribers, YouTube's rules. So until we get there, I'm putting these requests at the start of my videos. That's just a little disclaimer for why I do ask at the beginning. And now to our best players. This is a really tough one for me to call this week because given the times constraints that I've got, I tend to start taking notes throughout the game and then I refine them afterwards before I put the video out there. For instance, as I watched the first quarter, I had Brady Hough on track to be our best player. And then by the end of the half, I was just beginning to think of ways to describe how promising Elijah Hewett was shaping to be. Little did I know that Hewett was going to collect, I think, 11 disposals in the third quarter alone. And by the end of the game, he was going to finish with 22 and 2 goals. Also, I'm still keeping Brady Hough in my best players because he ignited our early lead. So starting right at the top, I'm going to put Jack Graham just a nose in front of Hewett in his best game for us in the blue and gold. That's Jack Graham. Watching his performance tonight, I actually think he added an entirely new facet to his football for West Coast. He possessed the ball for longer than he has previously and was way more aggressive with his run and carry. Now, everybody who follows this channel regularly would probably know that I consider Jack Graham to be one of our known quantity players. It's just basically explaining that it's just guys that you know exactly what to expect from week. So it's usually a way of me saying we're not going to go into too much detail when it comes to these guys. We know what they are. We know they're good, and they were consistent again today. It's often a little description that I give the guys in our best players. But for Jack Graham, his known quantity has been his defensive running, his tackling, and then just the general consistency with his no frills style of inside work. I think I described Luke Grego to have a similar mold of just no frills possessions, basically nothing flashy to it, but just still useful. But tonight, Jack Graham really broke that mold and he had a massive impact as a damaging inside midfielder without losing any of his known attributes that we rely on week in, week out. So I really hope this is a new normal for Graham because it solves some gaps in midfield firepower that we have had missing just while we're waiting for our young mids to become just more reliable and more established at AFL level. So he was right at the top of the list for those reasons. And he really stepped up from what I would previously describe as his known quantity efforts. Next up, as I mentioned, was Elijah Hewett. I can't actually think of a period when Hewett's stitched together consistent AFL games in a row, but every appearance that he makes, he's always shown how dangerous his potential is. His first half tonight, which is when I sort of started writing my notes, it saw a lot more of that. There were a couple of really Chris Judd-like possessions that actually ended badly, like with holding the ball decisions on him. One of them, the one that I'm actually thinking of when I say this, he nearly ran through an entire pack from stoppage. I'm not sure if anyone can remember. It was right forward flank. And he charged through about 5 guys, just full tilt. First moment the ball touched his hands, he was already at 100% speed, 5th gear. But he was trapped right at the end before breaking out, hit it really aggressively, and was done holding the ball. But it was a really impressive possession. It was really indicative of what I think we've seen from Hewett in the very short periods that he's had playing for West Coast, what he's capable of without him actually really following through and actually getting the chocolates at the end of it. But then the second half arrived. In the third quarter, like I mentioned, he picked up 11 disposals. He was literally everywhere. I think across a 10-minute period, he was involved in 2 or 3 passages of play where he picked up multiple possessions in chain ball movement that he set up and finished. And I'm pretty sure both of those resulted in the 2 goals that we had during that term. Then by the end of the game, he kicked 2 exceptional goals as well from outside 50 that they probably normally class themselves as goals that you wouldn't bank. When someone misses a sitter from in front of, 10 metres out, well, he made up for some of the unfortunate misses we had tonight with those 2. But also on an equally important separate note, Hewett's defensive pressure in the midfield is something that we desperately need. I consider Hewett, personally, Graham and Hutchinson to be the midfielders who can provide that maximum level of defensive pressure, especially at centre bounces when things aren't going our way. That's really what you need, is guys who can just start running the other way if they can't get their hands on it. So it's nice to see that we now have that combination available to us if these guys stay fit, the 3 I mentioned. And hopefully Yo's not too far away too, because he's an incredibly good defensive runner as well for an offensive mid. A bit like Brady Hoff, I had Waterman at the top of our best in the first quarter. The 4 goals that he kicked during that period might have had something to do with that. But even though he was held scoreless for the rest of the game, he still covered a ton of ground up the field, which he always does. Did a lot of selfless work in that space, just on top of being our reliable goal kicker as well. So he was definitely still in our bests, even though he kind of peaked for 1 quarter. Other than those guys, I also thought Liam Baker, Jack Williams, and then, like I mentioned, Brady Hoff all belonged in the best list as well. Liam Baker was consistent as ever, collecting 22 disposals, 8 of them contested, and playing just with that pure class that we've gotten used to now since he's been at West Coast across all 4 quarters, as always. Jack Williams, I don't know how many times I've said this on WhatsApp groups, but he just can't be dropped from this side again. I don't care what ins there are available. I know Oscar Allen was supposedly managed this week, but he has to be one of the biggest steals that we've had from late in the draft. Noel Long's probably another one. And just has such a high baseline performance every week, meaning the worst he has to offer is always good enough to be, in our side. Tonight he kicked 3 goals, and none of them were soft opportunities either. So for a guy that we've leaned on to step into the ruck for years, along with what he offers up forward, I just think his value is so underrated. And as I mentioned about Hoff, his first quarter set up the jump that we got in Essendon early. I'm not sure if this is the result of maybe messaging from McQualter during the week or how they train. I know there were apparently a lot of tackle bags out during the week, but very similar to Jack Graham. He was really uncharacteristic in how he took guys on. And just like Jack Graham today, he pulled it off. So both of those guys, they're really elite in that real minimalist use of the footy that they've got, But you can see tonight, with Hoff especially, if he's got the appetite to, he can break lines, turn guys inside out, and create really damaging chain plays up the ground just by disrupting the zone with his run and carry. So it's a shame his involvement backed off a little bit after his first quarter, a bit like Waterman. But for Hoff, that's just the nature of reliable defenders. It's not a possession count that you're looking for from those guys. So I thought he was definitely in our bests. And that's it for the best players. I also mentioned at the start of this video that I'd take a minute to discuss what's exciting about who's in our best players. And that's just because every week I have a separate segment about exciting young guys who may not have been in our best, but showed a little bit of promising signs for what we can expect in the future. Tonight, no one actually fit in that category, which is actually exciting in itself, because it was guys like Elijah Hewett, who's finally skipped that stage of being in the promising category and went straight into the most impactful players for us on the field. And then the other guy that I was really excited to have in that category of best players that I just talked about was Jack Williams. Even though he's had a lot more games under his belt than Hewett, and he's got a real known consistency, just to see him at the top end of our best players for me is really exciting, because both those guys are really young, and it's shaping who will be senior leaders for West Coast when we come out of this rebuild. So now we've kind of skipped that usual segment with an explanation. It just leaves my key takeaways. My first key takeaway is the ladder this year, where we're going to sit on it, or where we currently sit, and how that's going. Just because I think we missed a golden opportunity to win to take our first win on the medal or the premiership tally this year. By missed, I want to be very clear. I think we deserve to win tonight. There were a handful of very unfortunate moments tonight that pushed the 2 points that we lost by just out of our grasp. And while I do think we are in a part of the fixture where we can be most competitive, it's entirely possible that we might just fall short on more occasions during this period. This could really hurt our ladder position. So I just want to manage expectations for other supporters by saying that while I'm sick of being at the bottom of the ladder, it's been years now, this year is possibly the last good chance to make the most of it. What I'm referring to there, it's a bit of an elephant in the room. So just to put it quite bluntly, if Oscar Allen leaves via free agency and triggers band one compensation, which most commentators, especially your Riley Beverages and Cal Toomeys, who know the most about it, expect that he would, then we could very plausibly end up with picks 1 and 2 in this draft if we finish bottom of the ladder, which would be huge. Or even if we're second from the bottom, that would be picks 2 and 3. And like so that'd be huge considering how compromised the first round is expected to be in this draft. Apparently, there's predictions that the first round could be close to 40 picks with all the academy, NGA, and father-son picks available. But beyond addressing that elephant in the room, which I've now done, that's probably a whole discussion for another video separately. The other key takeaway is that we do seem to have a working formula that compensates or makes up for our lack of A-graders in the midfield. Basically, we've managed to unearth a few really aggressive defensive mids in Hewett, Hutchinson, and Graham, which I mentioned earlier. And we're actually playing a ridiculous number of versatile mids every week with guys like Gross, Davies, Baker, Kelly, and Reid also all considered to be mids. I don't know if Duggan attended any centre bounces this week, but even if you leave him out of that count, that's 8 midfielders in our squad of 23, which does afford us the ability to come in and be really physical and really aggressive, which is what we did with Essendon, possibly against a fitter and definitely against classier mids, and then just rotate our midfield through against them. I suppose it compensates by being able to wear them down and have guys that can just come in fresh reinforcements, if you want to put it that way. And I also want to mention that I was really disappointed for a few minutes when I first saw that Gross was the sub this week. But then on that same note, tonight was our third game in 12 days. So very similar to that rotation that I'm talking about. It's likely just good load management that he was brought in, just with one quarter as an 18-year-old who's played that much footy in such a short period at AFL level. And on that note, it's probably worth mentioning we now have a 9-day break with no injuries that I'm aware of tonight before playing the Hawks, who'll be coming off a 6-day break from their hit out on Easter Monday against Geelong. So I'm not making any predictions, but just thought I'd sign off with a little food for thought for everyone out there. So I'll hopefully see you all again for that review, hopefully if you've subscribed, and even before that with the waffle review from tomorrow's demolition of the Perth Demons that I expect, as long as 7+ is working and I'm able to watch it. But otherwise, thank you very much for tuning into this late night review, and until I see you again,